there's something I was wondering about, and I don't know. Maybe you'll be able to chime in adeptly on the issue. But uh, do you think that it's possible that the Canadians can add high end offensive talent, or you know, great offensive talent to their group without giving up like that top five, top six pick that they've got? Okay, do you think that there's a way where they have enough chips to get a top six forward and also be in a position where they can draft a Lidstrom or a Lindstrom, sorry, or an Iginla if they scale back a little bit at the lottery? Or does it have to be one or the other? Do you think?
I think I think they can add. That's kind of what I'm saying. High offensive talent, high end top six talent, probably not. Like the Canadians have a lot of volume to offer on the trade market. They have that Winnipeg pick, so really Canadians fans should be rooting for the Colorado Avalanche and then root for a whole bunch of upsets to happen in the other series so
Mm-hmm.
that that Winnipeg pick can get better. But and they have the Calgary pick next year. Um, and so the reality is, would you like Newhook was not a high end offensive talent, but he's a top six potential guy that they acquired for a late first and an early second round pick. So that if you're looking for that tier of player, then yeah, the Canadians can add a bunch of them. They have a lot of tools. They have a lot of assets to add players like that. Do they have the assets to add like a real game breaking, difference making, borderline superstar forward? Probably not. Not without giving up something really good like a Reinbacher or um, packaging something around Matheson and a new hook or something like that. Like really giving up some really good pieces. And I know a lot of people want to trade Mike Matheson as soon as humanly possible, and see Lane Hudson as already ready to take his place. But I think the reality for the Canadians is that they view him as a part of the solution here and as a way to either transition to being a good team or being a part of being a good team. He's not very old. His legs will probably slow down at some point, but I don't think he's close to that right now. So but again, you have to give to get. And it's clear that coming off the season he just came off, he would be a great trade asset, but it's so long-winded answer is I think the Canadians would have to include that pick if you want to get a real bona fide superstar-ish player.
Yeah.
I don't know how many of those are available. I don't know where they're going to find one. It's hard to. Those guys don't get traded very often. They're usually acquired in free agency. It's you don't see a trade like that happen very often without a similar player going back. It's pretty rare. It's pretty rare that you can build a package that's good enough to attract, at least in today's day. Like it used to happen more often, I feel. I just don't trying to think of a trade like that. Like, the Flames trade Kachuk and they get Mackenzie Weegar and Jonathan Huberdeau. Now Huberdeau's been not good since he's been in Calgary, but he's coming off a tremendous season, was one of the best offensive players in the league. So like that's generally what you need to get players like that.
Yeah.
And either the Canadians have players like that. I don't know if they're willing to trade them. It depends on what's out there, but I think they like the fact that they're building with Suzuki and Caulfield and Slav and Doc, and the guys that they have are part of the culture they're trying to create and have taken strides. Even Doc, even though he's been injured, is kind of part of that culture already. He's part of that group. So I
Because
think the most valuable asset they have is that pick.
yeah. Well, they have two first round picks next year too, so it wouldn't be impossible that they move their own pick in 2025 and they try to hold
Ooh,
on to this one.
that would be really ballsy. I would really admire that. That would be such a baller kind of confident move. That would be a good
Mhm.
message to send to your group. Look, we're
Yeah.
willing to trade next year's draft picks. We think it's going to be in the late teens or the early 20s.
Hmm.
And so now go prove us right kind of thing.
Yeah.
But that would be very not NHL. Most GMs are not
Well,
are very. I
now
mean,
they
you could slap protections on it, I guess.
that's
But
it. That's
yeah,
it. Top three, top five protection, whatever. But I don't know. I think there's ways to go about it. Um, the Canadians with their two picks. One thing also is when you look at there are tools now to calculate the value of a pick and what you need to package in order to trade up, or
mm,
if, what can you get if you want to trade down. So the Canadians could, if they were to move, let's say they draft top five and they want to trade up and get the number three pick, that would cost them the Jets pick
probably yeah.
to in order to make that move. So that's and if you it just in order to make sure that you get the quality forward that you want. But then you lose a trading chip if you were thinking of using the Jets pick for something else. So it's but the Canadians have a lot of draft capital. We've been saying over and over how they're not going to use all those picks.
Mm,
Uh, I think that a ballsy move uh, is probably what's needed at some point to make sure
yeah.
that they go they jump into they seize the opportunity that's in front of them, because
Mm.
otherwise if they wait and they play too safe, too prudent, it might be good but just not good enough. um, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and but that's just to kind of bring it back is why it got me thinking about some of the things the Canucks did to fill in, to fill in that glue, to get those guys to complete the pairings up front, to get the guys like those are important moves as well. That either they do it this year or they do it next year, but at some point they'll need to do it. Like it's you know unfortunately, like Brendan Gallagher would be a perfect guy like that if he wasn't making $6.5 million a year. No, but they have him, and he's going to be here, so he's a guy like that. Army is going to be the last year of his contract. Maybe he signs at a more reasonable number, and he becomes one of those guys, or he like, or he's gone. But the Canadians are going to need to improve the depth of their team up front, and I think it's a lot it's a lot more important than people are giving it credit for because there's been so much emphasis on adding the high end talent in Montreal for so long, and people have been so desperate for this. There still has not been a point per game player in Montreal since Alex Kovalev. Nick Suzuki fell just short, so that streak continues. So I get it. I get why the emphasis is on that, but you look at some of these teams like Adam Lowry in Winnipeg is their captain, and he's just a beast. Like he is just
Yeah.
like just an amazing hockey player. Just so good and so important to what that team does. Was definitely in my consideration for the Selke ballot this year. Like it was
His defensive
he
numbers are amazing. So
they're
good.
off the charts. He faces tough competition, and like
Yeah.
like those guys in the playoffs are when they really stand out. If you have a guy who can shut another team's top line down and thereby freeing up your own top line to play against lesser competition, it's gold in the playoffs. It's absolute gold. Like you need that. And
Hmm.
like and honestly, like a guy like Christian Dvorak, and I know a lot of people kind of make fun of him because he's so sort of vanilla and blah and whatever, but he's a guy like that. He's a guy, if he wasn't making what he makes at almost $4.5 million a year, he's a guy that that's why I think that the Canadiens, if they wanted to, would be able to trade him at the deadline next year if he's able to stay healthy, and if they're not in playoff contention. But because teams need guys like that. Teams need guys that can win draws, play against top players, kill penalties, do what he does. And so
Yeah, but you remember
it's
how Burge used to say that there are players that lead you in the playoffs and other players that
God,
help you go through the playoffs.
do I ever remember?
Yeah.
He
So
said it. He said it once a month.
yeah.
Yes.
Well, I think the Canadians first order of business in making sure that they have enough players that get them to the playoffs
Hmm.
before you start thinking about what sort of support role players could help us go through the playoffs. Don't you think?
Well, yeah, but I think those support players also help you get to the playoffs. I honestly believe that. Like,
Mm-hmm.
especially in a long season with injuries and whatever, like, having those players that you can elevate temporarily, but who fall back into a proper chair when you're healthy, they're important. And I look at Vancouver and I get your point that yes, the difference makers are their stars. But those stars were there last year. They were there.
Yeah.
These guys weren't, and it's putting your stars in a position to play at their best. It's making sure that you're not trailing so that often, like it's being able to put your depth lines out there and feel relatively confident that they're not going to give up a backbreaking goal that you're going to have to make up for. It's all these things over the course of a long season. I feel it really help, and we've long talked about the whole strong link, weak link thing, and whether hockey is a strong link sport or a weak link sport. And I think it's both. I think I don't think you have to pick one or the other.
No.
It's both. So it's really a matter of just picking your lane. And sometimes the lane is picked for you because you have what you have in terms of strong link players. And then if you have to pivot to becoming a weak link team and just raising the floor of your team, I think there's multiple teams that are currently in the playoffs that have shown that that is also a decent team building model to use to get success, even if that model has not resulted in the ultimate success that often. I think outside of the St. Louis Blues in recent years, we have not seen that model succeed, but I'm wondering if that time is coming.